Now, 8 acres sounds like a lot of land if you're talking about a house and a subdivision, but it's really only 8 houses. And the British have 2,000 people camping there. They have wagons, they have artillery, they have hamburgers on the hoof, they have mutton, they have chickens, they have geese, they have camp followers, they have supply wagons, they have puncheons of rum. They have a lot of stuff on the ground which would fill almost every square inch of that land. The brick house is a 3-story tall structural brick house, meaning that the walls are probably 24 inches thick on the lower floors to 18 inches thick. There's no way you can shoot anything other than heavy artillery through it. They also have a house garden. And all around here for many, many, many miles is just woods. And if you plant a garden in about 100 or 200 square miles of just woods, guess what's going to happen? Is there any gardeners in here? Every animal within hundreds of square miles is going to be there to eat everything you plant. So they had to build a wall around the garden to keep those animals out and have a chance. And so when the British arrived, there wasn't a fort there, but the palisaded garden is in effect a fort. And when I first started reading about this, I said, well, it's probably just a little picket fence or something to keep bird, rabbit out or something like that. But no, every animal, and you've got panthers, and you've got wolves, and you've got bears, and you've got every kind of critter that can eat your garden wanting in there, so it's got to be substantial. So the British in their camp have a palisaded garden. They've got a brick house and a barn. They've got these big holes in the ground, so you don't have to dig a foxhole, because nature has already dug you these holes that the springs are in. So all you got to do is line the edge of it. You can sit there and go down inside a little bit and load and come back up and take a shot. It's an extremely strong defensive position. So the Americans actually fight on this side all the way to the door of the brick house. And they, in fact, knock on the door. Who's there? They reach in and they grab a soldier and they use him to shield themselves as they back off, because the British have about 100 people in that house shooting down on them. They just happen to get the highest value person from a political, social standpoint who happened to be at that door. They didn't really knock on the door and ask that. But that's who they got and drug out of that house. So they didn't have a high value prisoner. Nathaniel Greene wanted Light Horse Harry Lee to take his cavalry, come around this flank, and rough the British up in here so that he could wrap around and control the house. He sent orders to Light Horse Harry Lee to do that, but the aides who took the orders couldn't find Lee. And so Lee's deputy, Joseph Eggleston, executed the order to the best he could, but he was not able to break through the British defenders of the Kim 84th Regiment and Coffin's little group of cavalrymen that were left by that time, maybe 35 men. Light Horse Harry Lee will stay in the war until February or the end of February of the next year. The Officer Corps, Greene wrote, Light Horse Harry Lee's wonderful, no problem. He's a smart guy. He's not saying anything bad about a Lee from Virginia. He's not stupid. But the Officer Corps ragged Lee and ragged Lee and ragged Lee. He said, where were you, Lee? Why didn't you finish this up for us? We bled a lot on this field. So the Lee finally quit, got mad, and went home. On the north, remember we've got these 350 crackerjack British troops. They fought all the way down till they got in the palisaded garden, and now they're behind a wall. So they're in a pretty secure place. Two things happen almost at the same time. Greene pushes his remaining 2 6-pound cannons up the road within about 100 or 150 yards of the brick house. He's going to blow the brick house down with 6-pounders. Not going to happen. So if you're defending and your enemy pushes cannons up too close, what do? You run out there and take the cannons, which is exactly what that flank company did, is run out there and they took Green's 2 cannons. And so then and drug them back in so that they couldn't be used to batter the house down. They couldn't have battered the house down anyway, but they sure could have made it miserable for those people shooting out of the windows. The other thing that happens is William Washington was in the reserves and he's bugging Green to want to get into action, and William Washington says, you let me at them over here on that north flank and I'll take my horsemen and I'll get them. William Washington doesn't really understand what he's up against. And Green says, well, take Kirkwood's infantry with you so that they run into the trees or somewhere you can't go, you got infantry. Washington outstrips them and gets caught up right up in here and gets wounded and captured. So now the British have a prize captive because they know somebody with the last name of Washington has got to be somebody good for a bargaining chip. So we have Henry Berry, the captain whose brother is a colonel and a member of Parliament. They have George Washington's cousin William now as their captain. So I have a friend who's a novelist and sort of an artist, and he drew out, not on a modern map, but kind of on using William Johnson's map, what it would have looked like. Because everything except the 8 acres right in here is full of trees as forest. And he's got the British camp all out here. He's got the palisaded garden, the brick house, and the barn that we believe was there. And so that's kind of gives you a little bit of an idea, except that he did not really do a good job of showing the valley, the 25-foot deep limestone valley that this creek is running in. Eutaw Holland Williams, who was the deputy adjutant general, who was a very trusted aide to Green, wrote a private letter to his brother. And he said, we were doing great, except some of our troops, when they got into the British camp, plundered the camp, and basically got into spirits in the camp. So some artists in the 20th century took the liberty of showing this mob scene. Now, I am personally offended by that for several reasons. Number one, these guys by this time, this is about noon. They've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning. They've walked 7 miles. They've fought 3.5 miles. They have had no water except what was in their canteens. There's been no opportunity to replenish that. They've had nothing to eat. And they come and fight through this tent city with all the tent pegs, all the latrines, all the cooking, outdoor cooking stuff. And did any one of them ever stop and pick something up? I'm sure they did. But guess what? There's 100 guys in that house shooting at you, and all you're hiding behind is some canvas tents. Not to mention the other 500 guys, including the provincial light infantry, who are holding the ground all around that house. So if somebody stopped in that tent city, trust me, they didn't stop very long. Number one. Number two, and probably more important, see people leaving already. It's okay. My friend Phil, it's okay. I can take it. Number two, if a British soldier got caught with alcohol in his campsite, that's a court-martialable offense. Now that is not to say that some sergeant major, some musician, some junior officer didn't have a bottom line. I'm not saying that they enforced it 100%. But the rank and file of British soldiers did not have alcohol in their tents. So, I think that's a disservice, but I got to address it. Charles Frazier, a great Charleston artist, drew this picture that he represented as the Eutaw house. And when I first saw this watercolors, I said, yes, we've got a picture of the house. The only problem is that we know the house was not there in 1806. One of the engineers on my team said, well, Charles, if you got enough limestone where there's creeks underground and there's holes where it's falling in, and the earthquake in Charleston fell some new holes in around the area, this thing failed with a bad foundation. You know, you just got it built on the wrong soil. And so we now believe that the house, while it may have looked something like this, had been long ago shaken, fallen in on its own weight before Fraser was old enough to have drawn it. And so although this is his version of the Eutaw house. The other thing is the description of the house says it's a brick 2-story substantial house, but it has garret roof. And so this house doesn't show that in this depiction. Here's our man, Francis Marion. Here's the house in the background, leading his troops on. And I suspect he was mounted, although Marion was, a man of the people. He very well could have been on the ground, leading his troops on the south end. So I like Robert Wilson's painting. It's a 20th century painting, but it's pretty good except for the flag problem. You can't have everything. And this is my favorite painting of the Battle of Eutaw Springs. I told you the British captured William Washington. William Washington commanded the 3rd Continental Light Dragoons. He was from Virginia. He was George Washington's second cousin. He captured Don Trioni, the artist, captured another one of those ode moments when you know that you've been had. And so when the bayonets start sticking in you and your horse goes down and all of a sudden you're captured by these British light infantrymen and grenadiers, you know you've been had. So that's memorialized that forever. My magic is not good. Is it trying to tell me something, George? Okay. Betson Lawson went by Eutaw Springs in 1874, and he drew them. I did this talk a week ago. A lady came up to me and said, I'll send you a picture of my family on that bank right there, taken in about 1906 with all these people dressed up in their Sunday finest. It looks exactly like that, except that there are no alligators in the spring. Eutaw Springs, until it was flooded over, was quite a stop for people to get something cool to drink when they're traveling up and down the road from Monk's Corner to Nelson's Ferry or to Camden, and Cypress Knees, and this shows you the height of the declivity. Go back. There you go. Boy, lucky us. Here is a photograph of the actual Eutaw Creek. In this photograph, the creek is probably 4 inches deep or something like that. And you can see it's about 10 feet wide. Nice flat bottom area. You could drive 2 18-wheelers up and down it. What you cannot see is that 20 feet on either side of the water is this 25-foot deep declivity this creek runs in. The topography, the creek is all still there. It's underwater. Have to use your imagination. But the fighting was not down in that hole. It was up on the west and south banks. Okay, George, forward. Okay, so it's between 12 and 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's hot, it's summertime. Continentals have their nice wool coats on. The Americans have fought all the way to the house, they fought all the way to the garden, they fought through the British camp. General Greene has lost the use of about a third of his officer corps. And to have command and control, to be able to find Light Horse Harry Lee when you need him to do something, is the only way you can effectively fight. He decides to withdraw his army back to the evenings before his camp at John Burdell's plantation. On the field, right at the edge of the wood, he leaves one of the two Hampton brothers, we don't know which one, as the rear guard. So he's controlling a mile of the battlefield and right up here to the edge of the clearing with his men. His idea was to pull back, lick his wounds, detail people to help with his sick, his wounded, and his hundreds of prisoners. At this time, he's gotten over 500 prisoners. And then come back the next day and renew the attack and deliver the finishing blow. Stuart licks his wounds, gathered up his men, probably buried some of his dead, gets his doctors to treat the others, starts sending people off to Monk's Corner, down the Monk's Corner Road. That road's still there today. The next day, it rains cats and dogs, as we say in the South. If you're fighting with a musket, a black powder musket, and you get it wet, you cannot shoot it, and sometimes you can't shoot it for a couple of days unless you have a Ferguson rifle, which nobody did. And so the battle was put off for a day. Nathaniel Greene detailed Light Horse Harry Lee, Francis Marion, Hezekiah Mayhem to go halfway to Monk's Corner around the British and try to stop any reinforcements from getting to Stuart and try to stop Stuart from escaping. And that's probably not enough men to do either one of those things, but Greene is still thinking and active offensively. Stuart loads up his wagons so that when it quits raining, they withdraw down the Monk's Corner Road, leaving about 70 seriously wounded people behind with a note on one of them's toe saying, "Please take good care of these folks for me." He has about 1,000 stands of arms which are broken and thrown into the stream, which soldiers would probably forgive you for that. But he had over 20 puncheons of rum. And they take them and roll them down into the springs and take the axe and knock a hole in them and drain all that excellent, good rum, military rum. You know, it was the best quality stuff right into the creek. And you know, whatever was downstream loved it. They probably had fish in the Santee that were world class that were jumping out of the water for joy. So what's the point of all this, except to tell you that we can debate tonight, which we're not, over was it a win or a loss. But the only result is that Stuart was too weak really to fight again. And that even though Stuart controlled the compound around the brick house and the spring heads, which really had little military value, once again Greene pushed the British 40 miles from Eutaw Springs back to Monk's Corner. Greene took his whole army to Ferguson Swamp, which is about 8 miles west of Monk's Corner, in essence daring the British to come back out and fight. One of the reasons for doing all this mapping has never been done before that I've ever seen of phase battle maps, is to determine the yellow area, which is the core battle area, and the red hatched area, which is the study area. We hope to be able to acquire property at different points in the battle area, so that at minimum there is places to pull off the road safely, place for interpretation, and also buying key pieces of property. At that intersection right there is the dead Chef's Choice restaurant, if you've ever been out there. That has been acquired. Right in here is Bell's Marina, a business that's been running for 47 years. Now, I think it is on top of where William Washington got caught. There's a contract to purchase Bell's Marina so that it can be turned back into Battlefield Park. Across the road is some really, really tangled, old, messy property. There are contracts in place now to purchase that property. There's property in this area that has been contracted to be purchased. And so we're making an earnest effort not to buy the whole of Eutaw Springs and all the houses there. That'll never happen, nor does it really need to. But we want people to be able to see the end area of the battle in this area. I'm not talking about the little 2-acre park that is there. The state had 5 acres there. They gave half of it to the DNR to build a concrete block building and boathouses on. This is a place where hundreds of Americans died to give us liberty, and they built a silly boathouse on top of it. This is the state doing it. So don't think that the state protects anything. And to be able to pull off safely in these areas and see what happened there. The project that I'm working on includes 20 different battlefields. There is trails being laid out so that people can start, in this instance, in Monk's Corner, go through Eutaw Springs, and end up at the Battle of the Waxhaws. That's just the first one. Half of the Battle of the Waxhaws has been purchased. Land at the Battle of Hanging Rock has been purchased. We own 476 acres at the Battle of Camden and are negotiating for 350 more, which is the vast area of the Battle of Camden battlefield, and so forth and so on. So this is the back work that gets done. Now this is important for several reasons. One, is fun for me. 2, it's preserving the story of where the Revolutionary War was won here in the South. And it's a must be able to say, upon this spot, men stood, fought, and died for the concept of liberty. Now, I can't answer too many questions because I'll get hooked off the stage, but with that, I'll leave it and answer your questions. JD.
So you're working on 20 sites authorized by the National Park Service. What are the chances that you guys will expand that after your report goes in for another 20 sites?
There's no chance that I will.
Have you heard any rumors that they're going to expand it?
Yeah, there's another grant already in place to do some other work, and I don't think it'll be nearly as extensive as this is, because without the wonderful volunteers who have agreed to help, we could never do this. I mean, if you had to pay everybody to do all this work, you would be looking at hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that is not going to happen. Now, they are spending many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars on acquiring property because people sitting in this room have given of their time and effort and love to make it in the right place. Now, the state of South Carolina is totally capable of getting it wrong, so don't think this is stupid. I hope you go sometime to Musgrove Mills, to the beautiful Vista Center there, and walk on where they've interpreted the battlefield. Only problem is that it's not on the battlefield. And we have found that one, we know where it really is, but it's a shame when you don't do the proper planning and research first, you pull the trigger and you end up with the wrong thing, or tell the wrong story. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Colonel John Lawrence died in this battle.
No, ma'am. John Lawrence died on the lower Cumbie River at a place called Tar Bluff a year later. Now, he's famous now because he's in that play, right? Hamilton.
Yeah.
But John Lawrence, I don't think, was at this battle, and he doesn't die till a year later.
Why did they put it in a poem?
Oh, I know that, I can't tell you.
It's political.
I can't speak to poetry. Yes, sir.
I understand after the war why Nathaniel Greene is considered such a great general and for our purposes. But during the time of the battle, I mean, he never won a battle, but they say, but he won the campaign. The question I'm asking you is, after this battle, did he feel any loss of confidence in his own abilities, or did he realize and send letters to Washington, look what I've done?
Well, if you had asked Greene, he considered this a great victory.
He did.
And historians today, we could have a whole conference just on debating whether it's a loss or a victory. But what is clear is that many people died, many people remained for life on both sides, and that in the end, Stuart and the British Army could not maintain these positions. Now, the British Army, after this point, could get 1,000 people together and go raid plantations for food, which is what they did. But basically, they fell back into the area around Charleston, the peninsula, and the Sea Islands, and kind of went into hold mode. Because this is 3.5 weeks before the British lose their second big army in North America at Yorktown. The British people had had enough of the American Revolution by 1780. This is later. Popular support is gone. King George, though, is determined to keep the war going. The War of American Independence by 1780 is nothing but a world war. And the American colonies are not the most valuable thing that the British are defending. And so we really mainly just had to hold on to the British people, made the British government give up and negotiate peace, which is exactly what happened. In the meantime, we needed to beat people out of the middle of South Carolina to, number one, protect good, patriotic Americans against their Tory brothers, and so that the British could not claim at the peace table that they occupied and controlled South Carolina. At the peace table in Paris, the British probably controlled maybe 5% of South Carolina, maybe. Yes, sir.
I'm curious about the North Carolina Continentals. I was under the impression that they were pretty much decimated by this time. Do you know where those regiments came from?
Are you asking me which counties they came from?
Yes.
If you'll see me after the talk, I have the order of battle with me, and I very well may know that. The problem is this: the militia regiments in North Carolina came from a county generally. The Continentals were blends. And so and by this late in the war, the North Carolina Continentals were pretty spread out where they came from. And there's some Continentals that are there kind of against their will. They're in punitive brigades because of their performance at Guilford Courthouse, alleged militia, and the penalty from the North Carolina legislature, you will go serve, 7, 8, 9, 12 months in the Continental Army, and so you have some of that. So I don't know that I can tell you exactly where those regiments were from.
Quick note. North Carolina began rebuilding its Continental line immediately after Guilford Courthouse. And they raised the first regiment within a month, the second regiment within another month. The third and the fourth were built up in August, just before this battle. And they were training at the high hills of Santee, getting trained how to move and all that, just weeks before this battle. And they finally filled the 4th regiment the week before this battle.
That's amazing. You told me something I didn't know. I know that they weren't at Guilford Courthouse.
Pardon me?
I know the Continental North Carolina